Is it Maya?
It's Maya Ellis, yeah.
Maya Ellis. Order Maya Ellis to move the motion.
Thank you, Madam Chair. It's a pleasure to be under your chairship, and may I start by wishing you a very happy Valentine's Day this Saturday. As we know, it is a truth universally acknowledged that a single man in possession of a good fortune must be in want of a wife. And while that is probably the most famous line in British literature, the fact is, when it comes to British policy, the role of relationships seems too often to be an afterthought. And yet, they are the building block of a healthy society. I'm the first to jump on our cultural obsession with relationships with a new Bridgerton season, but it's time that relationships become a political obsession too. Valentine's Day is a moment each year when the country reflects on love, partnership and the relationships that underpin our families, communities and society. With public interest high concerning the pressures facing modern couples and a growing body of evidence that respect, trust and equality prevent relationship breakdown, today this debate offers us a timely opportunity to consider the factors that enable healthy partnerships in Britain today. Healthy relationships are fundamental to a number of key policy domains. In health, strong and stable partnerships are associated with improved mental well-being, reduced loneliness and better overall health outcomes, while relationship distress is linked to increased demand on NHS and social care services. In education and children's services, the quality of parental relationships strongly influences children's emotional development, attainment and long-term life chances. In the economy, relationship stability and equality affect workforce participation, financial security and the capacity of families to balance work and care. And in efforts to tackle violence against women and girls, healthy norms, cultures and values are clearly fundamental. Policy decisions across these and other areas can also have a significant impact on couples' abilities to build and sustain equal, healthy relationships. Workplace policies, such as parental leave and access to flexible working, shape how families organise care and employment. Housing affordability and security influence relationship formation and stability. Mental health provision, early years support and the wider social safety net all play a role in reducing pressures that constrain partnerships, while legal and justice frameworks affect how society responds to abuse, coercive control and family breakdown. The fact is that relationships today look entirely different from just 20 years ago. Today, over 2/3 of families with dependent children have both parents in employment, meaning the majority of households are dual income. And with divorce well entrenched in our culture, 1 in 4 families with dependent children is a single-parent household. There are huge benefits to more people working, especially with women, and it's a good thing that people have access to divorce when relationships are not healthy. But we can't just take the benefits of these improvements without mitigating the impacts too. What happens to child development when both parents are working full-time, or when a single parent has no capacity outside of work and childcare? What happens to our ability to bond with each other as a couple if we are in a romantic relationship? What happens to our capacity to engage in and contribute to our local communities? These shifts in the roles of couples and households also have negative impacts on relationships that we could have but have yet struggled to mitigate. This government is rightly focused on growth as the key way this country can get back to a time of prosperity. But most parents I know, and bear in mind parents make up a huge part of the working population, most parents I know are exhausted. And if there's one thing I know as a parent of small children is nothing good or productive comes of being exhausted. So how can we expect great output and productivity from people in the workplace when the strain on couples is so high? We have to pay closer attention to how households are coping. And challenges in relationships not only impacts what we produce in the workplace, but also how we sustain our population. Our own Secretary of State for Education has recently highlighted our falling birth rate and has rightly highlighted actions taken by this government to try and change that, such as better funded childcare and the cost of living and housing. But couples are operating under unprecedented strain to both parent or care and work full time, and yet we are barely talking about that psychological toll. And then we are surprised that domestic violence rates increase, mental health in both men and women is plummeting and adding to our welfare bill, that send issues are skyrocketing and that couples decide 1 child is enough. As a government, we give couples screen time advice and encourage them to have more children, but we rarely ask what is life like for you right now and what would make your life easier to be a couple and a parent in 2026. Let's do that more. When it comes to domestic violence, government has made huge strides in developing a comprehensive strategy to combat violence against women and girls, but the fact remains that 3.8 million people experienced domestic abuse last year, and 1/4 of all UK residents have experienced domestic abuse since the age of 16. And the place that abuse really starts in earnest is pregnancy in the first 1,001 days of life. 30% of domestic abuse begins in pregnancy, rising to 40% in the first 1,001 days, precisely when infant brain development is most sensitive to stress and trauma. And yet, terrifyingly, only 0.5% of maternity patients disclose abuse, so those numbers miss the majority of cases. Abuse during this period worsens maternal mental health, increases adverse birth outcomes, and damages infants' socio-emotional development, effects that shift costs onto the NHS, social care, education, and the justice system for years. For the relationships between parents and children, which in turn leads to stronger, more secure relationships and behaviour from those children as they grow up too, we know that only 55% of infants currently develop secure attachments, and we know that insecure attachment is a key driver of poor outcomes later in life. Research this month from the Centre for Mental Health and the Parent-Infant Foundation has found that expanding access to parent-infant relationship teams to support parents in the most deprived areas to bond with their babies could save the government £1.2 billion annually. The single most significant thing we could do in this Parliament to start to change all this, Madam Chair, would be to introduce much better paternity leave, ideally at least 6 weeks paid at 90% of pay. Paternity leave in this country is truly embarrassing, and the fact is that 2 weeks isn't enough. The UK offer of 2 weeks of unpaid statutory paternity leave is among the least generous in Europe, constraining fathers' early involvement and entrenching relationship inequality. Joseph Rowntree Foundation modelling finds that 6 weeks at 90% of pay could deliver £2.68 billion to the wider economy, primarily through increased maternal employment and more equal sharing of care. 59% of people agreed that bad paternity leave made it difficult to share childcare responsibilities equally, not just over the short term, but the long term too, with patterns proving harder to shift. Happy to give way.
Sarah Smith.
Thank you, Mrs Jardine. It's a pleasure to serve under your chairship. Would my honourable friend agree with me that when women are 10% more likely to report that they do the majority of childcare, well, the same group would say overall 66% of those people surveyed would like it to be more equal, and actually 74% of men want that care to be more equal. But the only way we can achieve that greater equality is by addressing the fact that 2 weeks just isn't enough, and those patterns are laid in right from day one that hold women back, hold babies back, and hold men back from enjoying familyhood.
I completely agree with the point she's made, and I think the key thing there is that you're right, that men and women both want this, and so I think it's everyone in society is demanding this, and I really hope the government will listen and take action. And actually, an even more critical point, that it's not just men and women, but it's children who'll benefit from this too. 10 to men found that a loving paternal relationship was the single biggest factor from boyhood that does the most to prevent a boy becoming a man who abuses his partner. The macro win of all of this is higher labour supply and reduced gender gaps. The fiscal win is higher tax receipts and lower benefit dependency. And the household win is healthier relationships and more resilient income. Imagine the benefits if dad or partner could build a bond and confidence with baby, so that understanding is deepened between parents, bonds are built to strengthen that determination to care for baby, and a society is developed where protecting your family bubble becomes the pride point. Madam Chair, I'll be frank, I truly hope this Labour government, the most progressive and gender-balanced parliament ever, will catch us right up and commit to 6 weeks of protected paternity leave at 90% of pay, paid for by government, and do it soon. If we don't tackle the single biggest step we can to move closer to equality, then I don't know what we're here for. One of the facts that radicalised me more than any other, that tells me we are still so early on in the journey to equal and healthy relationships, is the fact that before 1991, it was still legal to rape your wife. That means that anyone who got married before 1991 did so knowing that fact. We are only 35 years into a world that expects men and women to be equal in a marriage. I would suggest we're only beginning to work out what that means for us as a society. One of the biggest hills we have to climb now is to help men and boys to find newly empowered roles in equal relationships, in the same way women and girls have been doing. I know many colleagues in this place are doing important work on building role models and positive education for boys, and the government's own Vogue strategy includes teacher training to spot the early signs of misogyny in boys. I truly welcome the plans for improved relationships education in schools that this government is introducing this year, particularly the plans to start this earlier in primary schools and the focus on how to develop healthy relationships. But I do think we need to remain live to how early we subconsciously introduce power disparities. And because role models are critical, as part of preparing for this debate, our friends at the Dad Shift challenged us to share couples we admire for their equality. And you know, the couple I think I admire most for their equality is Tom and Barbara Good from The Good Life. Amazingly, I only discovered the 1970s show recently, and I was slightly taken aback by how good they are to each other in a way that it feels we sometimes regress from these days. So it's always been possible to have healthy relationships, Madam Chair.
Give way
Happy to give way.
Thank you.
Natalie Fleet.
Thank you for giving way, and it's a pleasure to serve under your chairship. A relationship that I admire for its equality is that of local constituents Mick and Jane Yates. They've been together for 16 years, and to watch the way that he has gone from being a councillor with loads of political demands on him and his wife not being a councillor, to now his wife not only being a councillor but leading Bolsover District Council, a strong and inspired leader that he supports to thrive in her role. It's just the best. Jane says they don't always agree on things, political or not, but does the member agree that it's really important that even when we disagree, we find ways in a healthy relationship to love and respect each other? That is what at its core. Thank you.
I thank the honourable member for her intervention, and I think it's great to hear that Jane and Mick have such a positive relationship. Actually, one of the things that I really value is the value of debate, and I think actually the fact that in our new schools framework we're introducing oracy, to that ability to debate and discuss well, is really important. So it's always been possible, Madam Chair, to have these healthy relationships. We've just got to create the right social and policy decisions to make it easier. At this point, I want to give a quick shout out to the incredible role models I see talking to women and men about building positive, healthy relationships. Nair Roosh, Libby Ward, Jolie Braley and Ashley James and so many others are all relentless at making sure we talk about what healthy relationships look like. And I know there are similar strong role models for men out there too. However, we've still got a long way to go. Did you know, Madam Chair, that there are only 9 mentions of the term the mental load in Hansard? And yet on Mum and Parenting Instagram, I think I see it every other word. And, Madam Chair, in my office we have 4 core aims, and one of them is to be useful. So I want to end by leaving everyone with the most useful tool I've come across to tackle the mental load and equality in creating more healthy relationships. In Eve Rodsky's book, Fair Play, she says every task has 3 parts: conception, planning and action. To get something done, you first have to notice that it needs to be done in the first place. You then have to work out and plan how you're going to do it, and then you have to actually do it. So it's great to see more couples starting to share actions around the home, but let's start to see more equal sharing of the noticing and planning too. And yes, that will likely involve realising how big the mental load actually is for some people. Madam Chair, to conclude, healthy relationships underpin our healthy progress as a society, and whether we want to admit it or not, government policy underpins healthy relationships. We're doing great things as a government with improved relationship education, a powerful VOG strategy, more flexibility built into our employment rights, a huge increase in Best Start Family Hubs investment, and a strengthened court system. But we have to do more. 90% of dads say they want to be more present in family life and have a more equal relationship, but our current paternity leave offer, one of the worst in the world, blocks them right out of the gate. Stanford research published just this week found that allowing couples to work a day a week from home would increase the birth rate by 0.5, taking our current rate of 1.4 back up close to the replacement rate. And yet there are political voices saying we shouldn't work from home at all. I hope we put healthy relationships more front of centre of all we do here going forward. Our future depends on it. And again, I wish you a very happy Valentine's Day for Saturday.
Thank you. Can I remind members that if they wish to speak, they should bob. And if everyone could keep to around 5 minutes informally. Lee Ingham, please. Oh, forgot the question, is that this House has government support for healthy relationships. Julie Ingham.
Thank you, Chair. It is a pleasure to serve under your chairship, and I would like to thank my friend, the Honourable Member for Ribble Valley, for securing such an important debate. As someone who worked in this sector, delivering programmes with young people and to young people before I was elected, I really do understand how key this issue is. Because when we talk about healthy relationships, what we're really talking about is the kind of country that we want to be. Because long before a child sits an exam or applies for a job or is deciding who they want to spend the rest of their lives with, they're learning how to treat other people and how they expect to be treated themselves. So healthy relationships are therefore the foundation of confidence, safety, educational success and mental well-being. And if we can get this right early on, we can prevent harm later. If we neglect it, we end up paying the price in poor outcomes and avoidable crises.
Billy Minns.
And my honourable friend for Ribble Valley for bringing this excellent debate. One of the organisations that does some really interesting work in this space, which I'm ashamed to say I didn't know much about until last year, is Optimus International, who have developed their fantastic Loves Me, Love Me Not bookmarks, which they take into schools and colleges, and on there it's got the details about what the component parts of a healthy relationship and how to detect whether or not you're in a healthy relationship. So does my honourable friend agree with me that more initiatives like the one pioneered by Optimus International would take us in exactly the direction that you're explaining we need to go?
Lee Ingham.
Thank you. I agree with my honourable friend, and actually I've got Sir Optimus in my constituency as well. They do incredible work supporting healthy relationships, also supporting women in prisons, particularly I've worked with them on. But yes, I completely agree with you. In my constituency of Stafford, Eccleshall and the Villages, I can see our schools working really hard to get this right. So I will speak to a couple of specific examples. So at Tillington Manor Primary School, healthy relationships aren't an occasional lesson. They're woven through the culture of the school. So through a really structured PSHE curriculum, they learn about friendship, family, communication, conflict resolution, and also how to recognise healthy and unhealthy behaviours. Now, the lessons are all age appropriate and they build year on year, and they're delivered through safe discussion, role play, and reflection in a really safe environment. But what really stands out to me is the whole school approach. So they've got dedicated spaces such as the Nook and the Hive, where they provide emotional support for children and families, and the staff are trained in emotional literacy and well-being. So as a result, the pupils there are more confident in identifying healthy relationships, more likely to seek help from trusted adults. And the school has found that as a result of these programmes, repeated conflict has reduced over time, because that's what prevention can look like in practice. And at secondary level, Sir Graham Balfour School teaches relationship and sex education from years 7 to 13 as a spiral curriculum. So students are learning about consent, safety, what healthy relationships look like, and what toxic dynamics look like. And they also run focus workshops on toxic relationships and masculinity for groups of pupils that might be struggling. And I'm glad my honourable friend mentioned the debate around boys and young men, because I think often this becomes an incredibly polarised discussion. But the reality is that we know many boys and young men are navigating a confusing online landscape where extreme and harmful messages about masculinity are only a click away, and then not even a click away. You know, algorithms create extremist content and it gets worse and worse and worse. What we need to do is create spaces where boys can talk honestly about respect, emotions and what it means to be a man, because we know if we don't, someone else is going to fill that vacuum. Teaching children about healthy relationships is not about blaming boys, it's about equipping them. It's about helping them build the skills to form respectful partnerships, handle rejection, and to understand that strong men don't prey on the weakest in society. And the healthy relationship you spoke about, I thought, was a wonderful example of that. At the same time, we cannot ignore the pressures facing girls and young women. Schools in my constituency report increasing concerns around body image, self-esteem, and really unrealistic expectations fueled by social media. Girls measuring themselves against edited, filtered versions of reality being presented as the norm on their phone screens. So when another school in my constituency strengthened its RSE curriculum, students began to come forward about inappropriate touching that had previously gone unreported, which was a really significant step in creating the foundations of healthy relationships and makes it crystal clear why these lessons are so important. I also last week visited Burleyfields Primary School, where 4 and 5-year-olds were telling me, discussing with me, how they keep their brains happy and healthy. And they suggested, because I know we all need to know this, baking, reading books, imaginative play, and spending less time on our devices. And let's be honest, we all could do with a bit of that. And even at that age, the children knew what a healthy relationship and healthy activities could look like. But the schools can't do it alone. And I think there's a real opportunity here for our government to build on the strong foundations already in place. So continued investment through high-quality PSHE and professional development to ensure consistency across the system, and strengthening access to early intervention mental health services, supporting children and families before things escalate. And I do really welcome the government's focus on attendance, behaviour and school improvement, which I think is helping create conditions for healthier relationships in our schools. With 140,000 fewer children persistently absent, the new attendance and behaviour hubs spreading really good practice, I think we're seeing how this structure can work effectively together. In Stafford, our schools are already leading the way. They are demonstrating when healthy relationships are embedded across the whole school, culture changes, behaviour improves and children feel safety. So to conclude, I'd like to ask the Minister what steps she is taking to advance the progress the government has already made and build on the already incredible work being done in schools like in my constituency. Because we all know healthy relationships aren't a luxury. They actually are a vital fabric underpinning our society. They define so many other of the debates that we have in our chambers here, from academic attainment, from mental health to public safety. And I think if we want to create a generation that is resilient, respectful and ready to contribute, we must invest accordingly.
Freddie Van Mierlo.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to serve under your chairship, Ms Jardine, and I thank the Honourable Member for Ribble Valley for securing this debate. I know she's a very powerful advocate for babies in particular, for the work she does on the APPG that we do together, and I'm grateful for her input as well to the APPG that I chair on fatherhood. Ms Jardine, today I want to use some of the time to speak to 3 issues and zoom in on those that put stress and strain on relationships that are otherwise very healthy. These are parenthood, and in particular the role of fathers, caring for a child with SEND needs, and couples experiencing challenges with fertility. Turning first to parenthood, there's no doubt that sleepless nights and the massive demand on time, energy, and emotional resilience required in raising a child leaves relationships on the back foot. I'm told this is normal, of course, I'm told. But the demands on modern life and the rising cost of living, the crippling cost of nursery, and the need for couples to maintain 2 full-time jobs just to stay afloat piles on the pressure and increases the scope for conflict. Couples can experience a loss in connection, becoming little more than roommates and passing ships in the night. One thing that would help is better parental leave and pay. The UK paternity offer is the lowest in Europe. 2 weeks is not enough. The lack of leave paid at a livable level leaves men and birthing partners less connected to their child and less able to make an equal contribution to parenting. It can drive resentment and disconnection in relationships and bakes in traditional gender roles from the start and leaves children with lower quality relationships with their fathers. Research shows that fathers who take extended leave are more involved long-term in their children's lives, and higher involvement improves cognitive and emotional outcomes for children. Higher paternal affection has been identified as the single biggest determinant from boyhood in preventing violence against women and girls. Paternity leave should increase to at least 6 weeks at 90% of earnings, and eligibility should be extended to self-employed parents. Now, I welcome the parental leave and pay review. However, I am concerned at the pace at which it's moving. Families have already struggled so long under the existing offer, they do not have time to wait further for the government's extended deliberation. And I've pressed the Minister for Employment Rights, the Honourable Member for Halifax, on the speed of the review already, and will continue to do so. I'd like to turn now to caring for a child with SEND needs. I am sure other members will all be very familiar with the SEND crisis in their constituencies. The government is not providing upper-tier authorities with enough funding for SEND care. In Oxfordshire, there is a lack of specialist places in schools, and mainstream schools are struggling to cope. Funding attached to EHCPs does not cover the cost of SEND provision, including teaching support. Small schools, therefore, in rural areas, are least able to cover the costs from elsewhere in their budgets. The whole system treats children as a burden to be managed and minimised. Parents must therefore fight with the system, often to tribunal, to get the support they need. Understandably, this places immense burden on the parents' relationship, which leads to higher rates of separation amongst parents with SEND children. Finally, I'd like to consider another issue, which is fertility, that causes strain on relationships. Under the Buckinghamshire, Oxfordshire and Berkshire West Integrated Care Board, IVF treatment is restricted to women under 35 and provides only one cycle of treatment. NICE guidelines recommends that women under 40 should be offered at least 3 cycles. Given that the average age at which a woman will begin IVF is 35, the current offer in my area, Bob ICB, is unreflective of demographic and scientific evidence. The ICB have said their decision is based on unaffordability in providing IVF to patients over 35. But what other area of health do we allow ICBs to simply ignore NICE guidelines based on affordability? The cost of going private place additional strain on relationships at a time when physical, mental, and emotional burdens are high. Ms. Jardine, it is often cited that at least 50% of marriages end in divorce. But my question is, are we setting up couples to succeed when they start families? Starting a family and raising a child isn't for everyone, but for those who want it, it is in the interest of all of us to support them as they do. We shouldn't place all the burden on the individual couples to maintain healthy relationships when so many structural barriers lie in their way. Unhealthy relationships rarely exist in isolation. And if we are serious about prevention, rather than simply picking up the pieces, we must look honestly at the structural pressures and strains that families face long before crisis ever surfaces. The relationships I really admire are those that endure through hardship by focusing on mutual support, empathy, and understanding. But let's, in this place, give them a helping hand. I want to end by saying, although I've spoken to what can be done to help couples stay together, ending unhealthy relationships that have broken down is just as important. And the state has a role here too, where marriage, property and children are involved. I hope that the Minister will consider improvement in the areas I've outlined today.
Jim Shannon.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Always a pleasure to serve under your chairship. And a big thank you to the Honourable Lady for Ribble Valley for setting the scene incredibly well for all of us to participate in this important debate today. As a husband, as a father and a grandfather, the title urged me to take a moment to think, what is a healthy relationship? That's a question I posed to myself before I came here today, and I've been thinking about it in relation to how we contribute to this debate today. It's a question we should all ask ourselves, I believe, and I'm thankful to the Honourable Lady for giving us pause today, because if we are honest, we could all work on healthy relationships to make them that bit better and that bit more successful. From partners to children to friends and colleagues, finding healthier balances are something we can, indeed we must all do. It is a pleasure to see the Minister in her place. I wish her well. We look very much forward to hearing her responses to our collective questions. And many have referred to the grandchildren. I think of my 2 grandchildren here staying with me at the minute. My son, we live on a farm. My son's going to build a house on the farm along with his wife and the 2 children. But I always think when you come home, Madam Chair, and you've had a really hard week, and sometimes the weeks are incredibly difficult in relation to the pressures of life. Wee Freya's only 5 and she always tells you that she loves you. Wee Esther's only 3, but he's got that big smile. And both of those things tell you just how important grandchildren are. I understand that the importance of relationships are incredibly important for us all, but I so much value that opportunity to have grandchildren who perhaps can lift you when you don't feel very much like being lifted. And I think we've all got families with, I know the Honourable Lady has her children and they lift her, and others in this chamber as well. I know the importance of having those things in place. But however, it is also clear that as well as part of a healthy relationship is ensuring that our children and grandchildren understand what healthy is. And to me, a healthy relationship is a respectful one. And I think that's really incredible. Am I perfect? I'm sure I'm far from perfect. And I probably say things I shouldn't say and things I shouldn't do. I regret it often, but I do understand if I want to respect your loved one, you must watch your words and actions. And if you respect them as we should, and I do, You will be at pains to control a temper or hurtful words. And this is something which I know my daughter-in-law, I have 3 sons who are married and have 2 children each. And those things that their daughter-in-laws and the sons are teaching their children. You're worth more than harsh words or actions. You are a treasure and are worthy of a mutually respectful relationship. And where does that happen? You do it in the home first of all. You do it in your own life, as you should. But you also do it in schools. And I know in many schools in my area, they're always talking about relationships and how we build them. And I say, as a Christian, Madam Chair, the importance of churches as well when it comes to a young man meeting a young woman or vice versa in the churches, that the churches give time to that couple to build their relationships and try to guide them in a way which they can understand and use in their lives. So there's so much out there that we need to do. I want to reflect, if I can, just in Northern Ireland, where we've got incredible problems. I think there are probably problems across all of the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland. But the message does not seem to have landed well, and we have struggles with unhealthy relationships, and notably these are both genders being the perpetrators. In Northern Ireland, domestic abuse remains a critical issue, according for nearly 20% of all recorded crime. I know the Minister has no responsibility for Northern Ireland, it's a devolved matter, but I just want to give the figures and the comments, Madam Chair, to add to this relationship and this debate we're having. While overall reported incidents have shown a slight decline recently, certain categories like sexual offences have seen an increase. Police recorded almost 30,000 domestic abuse incidents and almost 18,500 domestic abuse crimes in 24-25 financial year. Wow, that's incredible. That's scary. On average, the Police Service of Northern Ireland responds to domestic abuse incidents every 17 minutes. Females represent some 67% of victims, while males represent some 33%. The highest male proportion recorded to date. 1 in 4 women in Northern Ireland will experience domestic abuse in their lifetime. There are a number of tragedies that must be recorded. There were 8 domestic abuse motivated homicides recorded between 24 and 25, compared to 6 the previous 12-month period. These are simply, Madam Chair, simply too many lives lost, too many children devastated, because there's those that are left behind. Sometimes you look at the person, the individual, but there's those that are left behind, the families that are left behind, the partners, the mums and dads, and all those who are families mourning, when it simply didn't need to happen. A further disturbing effect of domestic abuse is the effect on children. Over 23,000 referrals were made to support children affected by domestic abuse through school-based programmes in the past year in Northern Ireland, and the Board of Governors are now tabling Operation Encompass on each meeting agenda. Again, I underline the importance of schools to try and help in this area. This is a partnership between the PSNI and schools. If police attend a domestic incident where a child is present, they notify the child's school by the next morning, so that immediate trauma-informed support can be provided. Provided that wee child could be really disturbed about it, witnessed maybe the night before or the day before, and it's really important that these things are put in place. My heart, indeed all our hearts, Madam Chair, ache for the children who are living with not good examples of healthy relationships. They may witness that every day, who have been conditioned to accept what is unacceptable. And I think that we all have a duty to ensure that schools have funding available to put on programmes. Again, the Minister's responsibility won't be for that, but I would be keen to hear what her thoughts are. To take time to provide a safe space and a listening ear, and this is the only way that we can help to break the generational acceptance of the unacceptable. This is something which each of us in this chamber today, individually but collectively as a house, strives for, and something which I believe we can and will change. I have no doubt, Madam Chair, whatsoever, those who are present here today, and many who aren't able to come today, are committed to this change. And I think the Honourable Lady for Ribble Valley has done us all a massive favour by giving us the opportunity to come and make a contribution.
Just before I move to the front benches, can I check no one else wishes to speak? Thank you. Liberal Democrat spokesperson Munira Wilson.
Thank you very much, Ms Jardine, and it's a pleasure to serve under your chairmanship today. I think it's the first time I've spoken in a debate that you've been chairing. It's wonderful to see you there. And can I congratulate and thank the Honourable Member for Ribble Valley for securing this important debate today. Excuse me, and before I get going, I just want to say what an honour it is to follow the Honourable Member for Strangford today. We often joke in this place that he's at every debate speaking on everything, but today it really is truly an honour to see the emotion and the passion with which he spoke about being a grandfather. I sadly never got to know either of my grandfathers, and I would have been delighted to have someone like the Honourable Member for Strangford being my granddad. So thank you to him for that. I'll be honest, Ms Jardine, when preparing for today, I had thought, as the education team were asked to cover this debate, we were largely going to be talking about relationship and sex education. And I see the Conservative front bench thought that too, and maybe even the Minister. So there we go. So I'm going to go a little bit off script, because obviously the Honourable Member for Ribble Valley was much broader in terms of talking about family policy and how we support and champion families. And actually, you know, in terms of my spokespersonship, I am the education, children and family spokesperson for the Lib Dems, and that's very deliberately done because we as a party believe that we should be looking at children and families much more holistically and not just through the prism of education, and very keen to work not just as a party but cross-party on championing family policy, because I think as several honourable members have pointed out today, healthy relationships are difficult to build when we are living in such challenging times. And you know, we know that there's a cost of living crisis. We've got parents who are working full-time jobs, sometimes 2-3 jobs that they're juggling whilst trying to put food on the table and looking after children, and the pressures that brings upon them. And the Honourable Member for Ribble Valley and my Honourable friend, the Member for Henley and Tame, both talked about parental rights. And this is something that, look, I recognise the fiscal situation that this government finds itself in, but I genuinely think this is an area that we need to be finding the money to spend a bit more, on parental rights and parental leave, because we know, and all the evidence tells us, that those early weeks and months when after a baby is born, and actually in those early years, parental involvement at home can make a massive difference. And that is not making a judgment on those who want to go out to work. And I say this as a working parent myself, and I was very clear with my husband from the get-go, I am not staying at home, even part-time, once I finish my maternity leave. I want to be back in the workplace. And actually he wanted to take the decision to go part-time with our first child, and was largely full-time, apart from being a local councillor, with our son. I will, if I could just finish my sentence, I'm very happy to give way. But actually, the time at which my husband wanted to take more parental leave when our first child was born, that was before, towards the end of the coalition government, before the new parental leave rights had come into place. And so he couldn't take any paid leave. We were able to afford for him to do that. But I think, and I'll come to what I think we should be doing on parental leave and paternity pay, but I'll give way to the Honourable Member first.
Sarah Smith.
Lady for giving way. Just on what she was getting to there, an important element that maybe hasn't come through so far in the debate has been, if you like, the class impact of this and the policy situation as it currently stands. So the current situation is that 90% of paternity leave claims are from the 50% are made by those in the top 50% of earners. So it's very, very rare, actually, that low-income earners are able to even access the current system. And unfortunately, I think some of the challenges of the policies laid out under the coalition were that parental leave was only accessible to those who were better off to start with. And so if we are going to get this right now going forward, we have to design a policy framework and bring forward legislation that puts those fathers, those families first. Because if we're not achieving it for the families that are often, dealing with the most complex situations, if we're honest, then we're going to let down the children that need us the most.
intervention, and she makes a very, very powerful point. And look, I'm not suggesting that the parental leave policy was perfect by any stretch of the imagination. If it were, we'd have far more fathers, because it is typically mothers who tend to take most of the leave. We would have more fathers taking more parental leave. It's far from perfect, but I think the government's got an opportunity now with their parental leave and pay review to look at this situation holistically. And as my honourable friend has already set out, we as a party would like to see, all parents being able to share parental leave. So having 6 weeks of use it or lose it each. So, that fathers, as much as mothers, are getting an entitlement of 6 weeks. But then the rest of the 46 weeks, taking us up to 52 weeks, would be to share as they wish. And again, recognising that it's challenging fiscally at the moment, we would have an ambition to, frankly, try and double the rates of statutory maternity pay, which is also parental pay. And I think that probably speaks a little bit to the Honourable Lady's point. Because at the moment, the rates of statutory pay are less than the minimum wage, frankly, and lots of parents just can't afford to take that time off and feel driven back into the workplace often before they're ready to do that. So I would respectfully disagree with the leader of the opposition, who at one point said that maternity pay was excessive, because I think it's far from that. I think it's far too little, and we've got a long way to go. And I would just say, while we're talking about parental leave and pay review, please don't forget about kinship families. Right, we've got lots of families that aren't your conventional family. There's lots of children who can't grow up with their parents, but they've got family members looking after them, and kinship carers step up overnight to look after children, often giving up jobs, careers, and incurring costs that they have no statutory right necessarily to get any support for that, and they aren't allowed to take leave. They're often excluded from adoption leave as well as parental leave, and that is a real gap in the system that needs to be fixed while we're talking about family policy and building healthy relationships. So I will move on to what I was originally going to say, which is just around trying to build good relationships. We can't take for granted that children growing up today necessarily are going to get the right sources of knowledge. The rise of technology and social media has put our children at increased risk of encountering extreme and harmful content that distorts their understanding of how they should interact with each other, what romantic relationships look like, what sex looks like, frankly. And we know that women are 27 times more likely than men to be harassed online, and a third of 17 to 21-year-old young women have received unwanted sexual images online. We know the online world needs to be reined in, with tech companies and influencers alike profiteering from exploiting the insecurities that often men and boys feel through addictive algorithms that often promote radicalizing content and monetize misogynistic content. And we do know, and I think it might have been the Honourable Member for Ribble Valley who said that we shouldn't stereotype and our image of what men and boys are like at the moment. But it is true that I think that many are feeling increasingly lonely and isolated and struggling with all sorts of whether that's cost of living issues or lack of access to other positive activities. So I think we do need to look at men and boys as well as women and girls, and perhaps look at the different needs of each. And I said in a debate on relationship education last year that we need a culture change in all aspects of society. We need to encourage the men in our lives, our brothers, our fathers, friends, boyfriends, husbands, sons, to stand up against some of the toxic masculinity that we have seen, and to demonstrate to young men in their lives what it means to be compassionate and kind in all relationships, and that is a strength and not a weakness. And given the significant amount of online content that promotes violence against women and girls, particularly targeted at men and boys, we need to make sure that we are protecting our children and young people because of the harms on their mental and physical well-being, but also the impact on their social development and how they build relationships. And that's why we as a party have called very strongly for a ban on harmful social media for under 16s. I think different political parties have got different proposals on how that could be implemented, but I think that also needs to go hand in hand with something that I think the Honourable Member for Stafford referenced, which was getting people off their devices and into other activities, right? You can't start restricting things for children and young people if you're not giving them alternatives to go to. And actually I've seen that when I've gone to youth facilities which have been set up, which are easy and cheap or free to access, and when they've spoken to young people and they said, what did you do before you were coming here? They said, we'd be on our screens in our bedroom, on our phones. So we've got to provide those third spaces for young people. I'm very happy to give way.
Birmingham.
In Staffordshire, we suffered one during the years of the Conservative-led Staffordshire County Council, which coincided actually with the Conservative government. We suffered the third worst youth service cuts in the country, and it's one of the most regular things brought up with me when I meet with members of my constituency across the constituency of how few activities there are for young people. Indeed, I spoke to the church of the vicar of a church in Eccleshall who told me they did a map in Eccleshall of how many activities there are for older people and how many there are for younger people. And he came up with 112 things for older people to do in that constituency, but none for younger people. That part of my constituency, should I say. So would my honourable friend agree with me that while we're doing healthy relationships, and I actually think youth workers are key to modelling this behaviour because they give a safe space to talk, we must focus on equipping our local authorities, and in my case a reform-led local authority, to prioritise the needs of young people.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with her more. Youth services are critical. Youth workers are amazing, whether they're local authority employed or in our churches or in other groups, voluntary groups that we see up and down the country. And as the parent of an 11-year-old who is kind of at that age now, where in the holidays she absolutely doesn't want to go to holiday clubs, I'm trying to persuade her to go to some of the youth venues that we do have in the area. And we're lucky we've got still 2 or 3 of those facilities, but I recognise that in some areas of the country there isn't very much. And I welcome the fact that actually the government has made announcements in this area. With the Culture Secretary, I know has made some very positive announcements in this area, which I welcome. And what I'd like to see is a longer term strategy around that, particularly with workforce as well, on supporting that. But just turning to education in the classroom, I think it's relationships and sex education is so important for tackling and preventing violence against women and girls. I see some amazing examples in my own constituencies where schools are really working hard on this. I'm very proud to be in an area where our local authority, Richmond Council, is a white ribbon accredited authority doing lots of work with schools and lots of awareness raising work in the area. But age-appropriate relationships and sex education at school has a really crucial role to play alongside the role of parents and carers in giving children the knowledge and information they need to keep them safe and learning about consent, healthy relationships and online risks like pornography and sexting, which is just essential for safeguarding. Yet, according to a report by Internet Matters, many children say they've received no specific education in relation to sexual image sharing or only very superficial coverage in relationships and sex education lessons. And they don't feel able to get the information they want in whole class groups. So when the issue was discussed, many children felt they weren't offered enough information. And when it was delivered by teachers that were non-subject specialists, they often felt sped through the topic because they found it awkward. Was Zadakov to say I need to wind up? Yes. Okay. I wasn't quite sure, Madam Chair, whether you were struggling. I'll try and bring my remarks to a close to say, look, the Liberal Democrats believe that an age-appropriate RSC curriculum should be led by a qualified teacher and delivered in a safe, non-judgmental setting and should include teaching about sexual consent, LGBT+ relationships and issues surrounding explicit images, because all young people deserve access to high-quality education that empowers them to make safe and informed choices. And so, and that obviously does also mean proper funding, training and resources to deliver high-quality RSE. And I've already set out some of the things we'd like to see in terms of family policies. If we want to see achieve a society where all can flourish and have happy and healthy relationships, we need to invest in our families and in our education system. Thank you, Madam Chair.
And spokesperson Rebecca Paul.
Thank you. It is a pleasure to serve under your chairmanship, Ms Jardine. And I'd just like to congratulate the Honourable Member for Ribble Valley. It was a really refreshing, measured, fantastic speech. And like the Honourable Lady from Twickenham has mentioned, it was a slightly different topic to what I expected, but it was really pleasing to me, actually, to hear so much about the importance of strong families. And maybe we can do this debate again and I'll write a slightly different speech. But I think between us all, we will cover various different aspects that are relevant and important. And I'd also like to let you know that I too am watching season 4 of Bridgerton, a classic Cinderella tale, very enjoyable. So healthy relationships are underpinned by respect. I would tend to say that in most cases, the way we wish to be treated ourselves is probably a good place to start in terms of our relationships with others. But we do continue to see high levels of violence against women and girls and other kinds of abuse like coercive control with no real signs of reduction. This suggests something is badly going wrong, and the government has rightly set challenging ambitions accordingly to address this huge societal problem. We very much welcome that government has recently published their VORG strategy and their ambition to halve such violence. We hope it will build upon the work undertaken by the previous government in this space. So the Conservatives elevated violence against women and girls to a crime type that policing leaders must treat as a national threat and committed over 230 million to the Tackling Domestic Abuse Plan from 2022 to 2025, including quadrupling funding for victims and witness support services by 2024-2025. This complemented the 300 million investment in the 2021 Tackling VORG strategy as part of the goal to drive down the prevalence of domestic abuse. It was also the last government which made stalking an offence by creating 2 new offences, stalking and stalking involving fear of violence or serious alarm and distress, making it easier for victims to hold stalkers to account. On top of this, we also outlawed upskirting to further protect women and girls, criminalised revenge porn and deep fakes, and introduced the Domestic Abuse Act 2021 and, accordingly, domestic abuse protection notices and orders. We are clear that robust action against offenders is vitally important in the fight against VORG. Coming to the question of education, while relationship education in schools can only go so far in addressing male violence against women and girls, it nevertheless plays an important role in educating young people on what positive and healthy relationships look like and the importance of putting in place clear boundaries. These skills are vital in navigating relationships, recognising potential abuse, including that of coercive control, and knowing how and when to seek help when needed. Relationship education was made compulsory in all primary schools and secondary schools in 2020. It has several core objectives: to help foster pupil well-being and develop resilience and character, as well as ensuring that pupils are happy, successful and productive members of society. But in spite of this, shockingly, nearly 3 women every single week are killed by men, and many, many more are raped and abused. The risks and harms arising from the online world is feeding this problem. Pornography is available online at the touch of a button on smartphones. And let me be clear, this is harmful stuff, depicting strangulation, rape, violence, and degrading acts like spitting on young women. Any young man seeing this misogynistic content day in and day out will inevitably view women and girls differently, more likely to see them as an object to use and degrade. By comparison, the relatively trivial amount of time spent learning the opposite in a classroom cannot hope to offset this. The single best thing we can do to stem this tide is to introduce a ban on smartphones in schools for under 16s and increase the age limit for social media to 16. It won't address the whole issue, of course, but it will massively help. The Conservatives have backed this all the way, and I asked the Minister today whether she will too. And I also just want to recognise the government's proposals around banning strangulation content, which is much welcomed and a really positive step forward. I must say, though, that I am concerned that our strong desire to eradicate VORG has led to boys and men being unnecessarily demonised too. There is a difference between calling out abusive behaviour and labelling a whole set of masculine attributes as toxic. Masculinity is a wonderful thing, the yang to femininity's yin. Certainly not toxic in the great majority of cases, particularly when not fuelled by online porn. Our answer to a genuine question around abuse of girls has been to tell a generation of boys, you are the problem. And then we are surprised when this approach, instead of nurturing healthy relationships, creates resentment and pushes more young men towards the very online subcultures that feed off grievance and rejection. Instead, we need to positively embrace what being a good man, a good partner, and a good father looks like. Fundamentally, boys need positive role models to learn from and model their own relationships on. And that is why fathers and other male role models are so important. I look forward to hearing from the Minister on her thoughts on this. When it comes to education on healthy relationships in schools, we have seen an ever-growing load of subject matter covering from relationships to mental health. Good RSHE can be a protective factor when it is age-appropriate, factual, and taught impartially. But it's also important to recognise that schools should not be trying to replace what should be the family's role to educate on. There is a careful balance to be struck. As well as confident, self-assured boys, we need confident, self-assured girls who are clear about their boundaries and what behaviours they are willing to accept and not accept. That means not telling them that selling their bodies is empowering, expecting them to always be kind, and not telling them that the feelings of men are more important than their safety. On that point, I would hope that we might hear something today on the government's unresolved approach to gender questioning guidance for schools and the release of the long-awaited code of practice on single-sex spaces following the recent Supreme Court ruling. Obviously, the government cannot claim to support healthy relationships for as long as it leaves schools to navigate this issue without proper guidance. It is incumbent on this government to reinforce rules that entitle our girls and women to privacy from males when they are getting changed. This is basic safeguarding stuff. We received the draft non-statutory guidance on gender questioning children back in December 2023, but 2 years later, schools and parents are still waiting for it to be published. I would ask the Minister to confirm when we can expect to see both the gender questioning guidance and the revised code of practice from the EHRC. The final point I wish to touch on today is the need to be honest about where the deeper formation of relationships happens. Schools matter, and good teachers can be life-changing, but let's not lose sight of the fact that children spend most of their time outside the classroom. The attitudes that shape relationships are forged primarily at home, as well as online and in peer groups. If we want healthy relationships, we cannot pretend that a curriculum document can substitute for a loving and nurturing family structure. Families can come in all different shapes and sizes, but the important thing is that they are loving, nurturing, and respectful. Children learn how to interact with each other. They learn to interact with others from their main caregivers. So I would also ask the Minister what her plans are to support strong families, given this is likely the most impactful way a government can ensure healthier relationships going forward. Thank you.
Minister Jade Bottrell.
Thank you, and it's a pleasure to serve under your chairship. I want to thank my honourable friend, the member for Ribble Valley, for opening this debate on the government support for healthy relationships. It was great to hear from honourable members in this debate talking about what healthy relationships mean to them. And it's also wonderful to see both Movember and Dad Shift in the gallery here today. This debate could not come at a more welcome time. We have recently published our groundbreaking strategy for halving violence against women and girls in the next 10 years, backed by at least £1 billion of government funding. We published updated relationship, sex and health education guidance last summer that will be implemented in all schools from September. And we've committed to £8 million to support schools to maximise the impact of curriculum changes. The importance of healthy relationships was written in our manifesto, and we're proud of the action this Labour government is taking in this area. The new curriculum reflects the importance of supporting young children to build the skills for healthy relationships from the start of primary. We shouldn't pretend that relationships are easy. The reason we're having this conversation now is because we know that they're not. We will support children to learn the difficult skills of setting and recognising healthy boundaries, balancing different people's needs and preferences, managing conflict and communicating with kindness and respect. In secondary school, we will move away from exclusive focus on consent, which has led to a culture of anything goes so long as I've got a yes. Young people must understand the importance of consent, but they must also understand that consent alone is not enough. We want to raise a generation of young people who value kindness, who pay attention, who notice power imbalances and look out for vulnerability. This is fundamentally about how we approach our relationships. Are we out there trying to get what we want from other people, or are we here to be kind and take care of each other? We will teach young people how to turn a critical lens on content in any form of media that encourages harmful attitudes or prejudice, so that in an online world of Andrew Tates, AI deepfakes, and hatred presented as brotherly advice, we will ensure that young people can identify misogyny and recognise how social media influencers capitalise on it to the detriment of both men and women and boys and girls. We have to be absolutely clear that this does not mean stigmatising boys or making boys feel like they are the enemy. Where society polarises, the job of schools is to help young people find their common ground. Where boys and young men feel lost or isolated, the job of schools is to ensure they have a safe space where they feel like they belong. None of this is easy, and we're not saying teachers hold all the answers, but we are clear that teachers need support, and that's why we're investing £11 million in support for schools. £8 million will support the RSHE curriculum, and a further £3 million will provide targeted support for children who are displaying harmful behaviours, because we believe that every child deserves the support needed to develop healthy relationships. Honourable members who have contributed to the debate have rightly drawn attention to the importance of strong, loving families. I know a lot of members in this debate today have discussed the need for stronger paternity leave. This government has launched a full review of the parental leave system. This is a chance to look at how the whole framework can better support working families and reflect the realities of modern work and childcare. We know that equitable child arrangements not only promote family stability, but also help address the gender pay gap. And as the member for Ribble Valley rightly raises, what it means to grow up in a typical family has fundamentally changed. Divorce rates have grown, more women are in the workforce, and households are much more likely to have two earners. Therefore, government policy must reflect and support families as they actually exist in modern working Britain today. That's why, through our Giving Every Child the Best Start in Life strategy, we have set out our first steps to expand and strengthen family services, making early education and childcare more accessible and affordable, and improve the quality of early education and childcare to make real change happen for families and children right across the country. We are already delivering support to working families. Eligible working parents of children aged 9 months and older are now benefiting from 30 hours of funded childcare per week, which can save families up to £7,000 per eligible child per year. And we are improving access, creating tens of thousands of places in new and expanded school-based nurseries. Schools have already reported over 5,000 places made available through the first phase of this programme. Backed by £45 million of funding, Phase 2 will deliver at least 300 new or expanded school-based nurseries ready to offer new childcare places in the 2026-2027 academic year, with an increased focus on supporting families from disadvantaged areas to access early years provision. Phase 3 will be led by local authorities who have been invited to develop multi-year funding proposals. This government continues to prioritise and protect investment in the early years. And that's why we're investing over £1 billion more in the early years entitlements year on year, and we will continue to go further. From next year, we will give additional funding to extend early year pupil premium in the areas most in need, testing new approaches to maximise its impact, ensuring that children most at risk of falling behind receive high-quality, evidence-informed support, to make sure that the early years funding system is hardwired to benefit those children and parts of the country that have higher levels of additional need. We will review early years funding, including national funding formulas, and consult the sector on the changes by summer this year. And as part of the child poverty strategy, we will also work with the Department for Work and Pensions to make it easier for parents to use universal credit childcare and the funded hours together, helping them access work. These changes are made with modern families in mind. The 30 hours of childcare entitlement is designed to help families get on, not just get by, and is assessed on a per-person basis to ensure there is no incentive for the lower earner in the household to reduce their income to be eligible. But not every child gets the chance to be born in a safe and stable family. Domestic violence can sometimes begin during pregnancy. Refuge has reported that 1 in 3 pregnant women experience domestic abuse, and between April 24 and March 25, 14% of its service users reported being pregnant. That's why NICE guidelines are clear that all women accessing maternity services are asked about domestic abuse routinely, typically at their first antenatal booking appointment, so they can be referred to specialist services. But as our strategy for halving violence against women and girls makes clear, tackling domestic abuse is a whole society effort. And when proximity to it begins in childhood, the member for Ribble Valley is correct that Best Start family hubs can be so vital for identifying and tackling it. And when parents are struggling to support their children, family hubs can give them new skills so they can help their children's social, cognitive and emotional development. That's why we are building on this year's £126 million funding boost for family hubs and Start for Life, and we'll be rolling out our Best Start family hubs to every single local authority from April. But children also learn from their peers, and that's why we are actively considering the evidence around both peer-to-peer and trusted adult relationships as we develop our pupil engagement framework. This framework will help all schools measure and improve the key factors that determine pupils' engagement in education. This includes a sense of belonging and safety, inclusion and relationship with teachers and fellow pupils. Rich, healthy relationships thrive in a context of shared purpose and understanding. We all know this from our experiences taking part in sport, putting on a play, or even when doing things like confronting and understanding differing points of view. That is why we are supporting schools and colleges to develop strong and strategic enrichment offers through our upcoming enrichment framework, encouraging a sense of belonging and enabling children and young people to form communities to explore their interests and develop their skills. I was really touched to hear of the couples that are admired by members across the House. The contributions reminded me of my own parents, who worked so hard to raise me and my two siblings. They both worked long shifts and put food on the table, and around that table, they made decisions together, and they taught me the values I carry here with me today. I grew up with the benefit of healthy relationships, at home, at school, and in my community. Every child deserves that chance, and have such capacity to enjoy positive, healthy relationships when given the opportunity. Through our childcare expansion, our strategy to tackle violence against women and girls, our work in schools, our review of parental leave, and our plans to support and nurture boys, this government is committed to helping everyone benefit from them. Thank you.
Mia Ellis now has up to 2 minutes to wind up.
Thank you, Ms Georgina. It's been a pleasure to serve under your chairship. This has been an important opportunity for us to reflect on what healthy, equal relationships look like in Britain today, the precious couple space, and how policy can better support them. I'm grateful to all the honourable members who contributed today, and can I pay special tribute to the honourable member for Strangford for his beautiful tribute to his grandchildren. I really believe that children learn from what they see, so they clearly have grown up in such a loving family to reflect such love to you. And can I also acknowledge the spokespeople in the room and the fact that actually healthy relationships do span multiple departments, and part of the challenge is making sure that it doesn't fall between the gaps for that reason. Some days you carry the load and some days you're carried, and I'm grateful to all those relationships in this room and all at home who carry me on a regular basis. And on that note, can I give a final thank you to my husband, who I called just before this debate to tell him that the holiday I thought I'd booked for Saturday, in fact, starts tomorrow. to which he just laughed and said, I'll start packing. That, Ms Jardine, is sharing the load, and that is what we all deserve. Thank you.
Thank you. The question is that this House has considered government support for healthy relationships. As many as are of that opinion say aye. Aye. Of the contrary, no. I think the ayes have it. Order. The sitting is now suspended until 3:10.